Oh, shit. Okay. And I need another thing going in the background so that... Boom.
Original Galaxy Brains take. Skyrim.
Fucking
bad,
frames.
actually. Alright, seriously. I have all the same problems with this game as you do. Hypothetical critic watching this video. John Strawman. The only difference is it hasn't ruined for me an otherwise unique game experience, which any number of supposedly better games just fail to hit. The Witcher 3 might be a better RPG with, like, acting and characters with names, but
yes.
will it let me take Geralt off into the wilderness to live as some kind of scuba-addicted hermit? Well, no, but Elden Ring provides a challenging open world with the kind of hands-off, figure-it-out-for-yourself approach players have been starved of for years. Or can I make a little shack for my wife and kids, then abandon them for my vampire goth GF? Well, no, we're not really that kind of game. Oh, is that right? Then stop pretending to be. I know the segment's probably come off as super defensive so far. That's because it totally is. But if it helps, know that of the dozens of characters I've made, hundreds upon hundreds of hours poured into this game, I've beaten the main story once. If you look at Skyrim as a single-player campaign, from the burning of Helgen to the final battle with Alduin, it's subpar. The main story ain't great. Hell, it ain't even the best Elder Scrolls main quest in this video. But the true Skyrim enjoyer doesn't rush to beat the story. They don't even trigger the dragon storyline, because it's not any one quest, main or faction, that holds this game together, but the entire immersive experience of being in this world. If you're comparing Skyrim to other games based on the quality of its main story quest, you're looking at Skyrim wrong. Skyrim might actually be one of the foremost gaming examples of a whole surpassing the sum of its parts. I mean, graphics, not terrible, but I mean, they were certainly better at the time, and it's kinda stiff and ugly now. Story, mediocre. Combat, pretty floaty and clunky if we're being honest. Characters, you. AI, you've been seeing this, right?
Whoa. Aww. Really? That's when you had to fucking clunk out on me? Mon.
By how spicy this title is, because
You're
normally
spicy.
They are,
Yeah, no, that was inappropriate. I agree.
He also called on Kiev, on the authorities in Ukraine, to come back to the negotiating table. He made it clear that even though Russia was looking for a peace deal, these regions would not be up for negotiation. He said that these people will be in Russia forever. I'm slightly paraphrasing in here, but he has drawn Russia's red line. Of course, what we also know is that Vladimir Putin has declared openly that he will defend these territories as if they are part of Mother Russia, with the nuclear weapons that he's got, if he deems it to be necessary.
And Nick, I want to bring you in to talk about the counteroffensive that continues to play out there on the part of the Ukrainians. We have Vladimir Putin lying to the public, lying to the world, and saying that this is now part of Mother Russia. President Zelensky had said since day one, if this happens, if there's a referendum, if there's an annexation, there is no turning back. He is not going to the negotiation table. So what happens next in terms of any possible talks between these two sides?
I think that prospect is pretty remote, and this seems to be the Kremlin's big play here, judging from the main takeaway from the speech that was predominantly a revisionist history, again painting Russia as a victim from Western imperialism, essentially accusing the West of exactly what Russia's doing here. He's essentially saying, let's have a unilateral ceasefire here, let's stop fighting, let's go to the negotiating table. Now, it's fair to say that in the past, Russia has used diplomacy as a time for a military pause, to regroup, or to continue to pursue its military objectives, and that's why Washington, the EU, and Kiev have pretty firmly rejected Russian diplomacy as something that doesn't engage with in earnest. But it seems to be holding that out here with the background threat, as you just heard, of possible nuclear force, something that, of course, everyone should treat as remote and the last horrifying idea, but in the background, during all of this, I have to say, looking at the crowd during some of that speech, there weren't that many convinced faces, because they know that on the ground here in Ukraine, as Russia announces these new areas of its territory, parts of that which Ukraine controls is growing hour by hour. Now, importantly, in Luhansk, one of the four regions which they've just said is part of Russia. They are on the verge of seeing a key town, a railway hub called Lyman, which has possibly thousands of some of Russia's best troops in it. That seems to be encircled, almost, or close to being encircled, by a rapid and very methodical Ukrainian advance. We've seen how it's burst through the countryside here over the past weeks. It's continuing to do that in other areas around Luhansk. And so the notion suddenly that these areas are now just an indisputable part of Russia legally is, of course, absurd, but it's also practically on the ground being dismantled slowly hour by hour. And there are some seeing this potential encirclement around Liman as the possibility for yet another Russian collapse, like we saw around the second city of Kharkiv just weeks ago. Supply lines were hit, the Russian army ran. That's not impossible here. And so Putin is giving us this extraordinary vision of a Russia under threat that now is declaring its territory expanded to protect citizens that it considers it has the right to offer protection to. But at the same time, its conventional forces have been failing here for weeks. Its partial mobilization has succeeded in sending over 200,000 Russians out of Russia to avoid it, but we haven't seen tens of thousands of properly equipped troops here at all to alter the dynamics on the battlefield. And so we're in this dangerous moment where Russia seems to have played its cards, said these are now parts of Russia, do not touch them, or we reserve the right to do anything to defend them. It's called internationally, perhaps now for more diplomacy, but that looks likely to be rejected. And we're now left in the, well, what else? Moment where Ukraine continues to go forward because Russia doesn't seem to have conventional forces there to change things.
Matthew, looking at that room, it looks anything but celebratory in terms of those officials who Vladimir Putin is addressing. This is supposed to be a day of jubilation that he would like to copy what happened in 2014 when he annexed Crimea. Clearly, the situation is different right now. A rare admission of mistakes being made yesterday that struck me in terms of the partial mobilization of troops in Russia. And you've seen throughout the country, as we just heard, that many hundreds of thousands, perhaps, men have been trying to leave because there is concern just about the number of men who have been called up for duty.
Yeah, I mean, look, this whole adventure from the Kremlin's point of view has been misstep after misstep. And it's just incredible looking at the faces of the men and women in this audience in the Kremlin as Vladimir Putin gives this speech, which is meant to be, as you say, a celebration of the homecoming of these broke-away parts of Russia as they see it. Everyone's got a blank expression on their face because they know what the cost has been so far to the country and what it's going to be. So one of the things he said is, look, it's almost unbelievable. He was like, we're going to rebuild the destroyed cities. We're going to make these regions prosperous again. And you know, there wasn't a glimmer of agreement on those people's faces. They are sitting there because they've been told to sit there and nod their heads. And I think
these are some of the poorest regions of Ukraine, we should note as well, especially there in Donbass.
Well, they're industrial regions. They've got industrial potential, but I mean they've been devastated over the past 7 months. They've been laid to waste, these areas, and you know it is going to be a burden on any country, let alone one like Russia, to rebuild them.
We shouldn't look lightly on that nuclear threat that he continues to dangle. He says he's bluffing. Hopefully, we won't see that day. Nonetheless, it's across the Rubicon here. We can say that for sure. Good to have you on set with us. Matthew Chancellor, Peyton Walsh, thanks to you. Pretty positive.
Marjorie Greene is getting a divorce. Her husband of 27 years has filed for it and apparently will go through. Harry Greene, who married Marjorie back in 1995, filed for divorce earlier this week, stating that their nearly 3-decade marriage was irretrievably broken. He also stated that they'd been separated for some time. And I want to be clear that you might think going into this, when you saw the news, well, John disagrees with Marjorie Greene on literally everything he seems to have a big problem with, so he's probably delighting in this. I want to be clear. Don't care. I don't even really see how it's news. It seems totally personal to just Marjorie Greene. I hardly even see where it's any of my business or anyone else's business. And then I saw the statement that she put out. And I still largely feel the same way, but she found a way to take something that shouldn't have merited any like strike back, and she found a way to make it kind of nasty. So she said this: marriage is a wonderful thing, and I'm a firm believer in it. Our society is formed by a husband and wife creating a family to nurture and protect. Together, Perry and I formed our family and raised 3 great kids. He gave me the best job title you can ever earn, Mom. I'll always be grateful for how great of a dad he is to our children. This is a private and personal matter, and I ask that the media respect our privacy at this time. First of all, after you came up in the world by hounding the survivors of mass shootings when they just wanted their privacy, I care a little bit less about your privacy. But can you just say the nice things that you said about your soon-to-be ex-husband, which she did say nice things. It was mature. It was above what I would have expected her. Does she have to effectively kind of slam feminists as well as the LGBTQ community at the same time?
Yes,
Can you not just say, this is about me, it's not about y'all, stay out? Does she have to attack other people in literally everything that she says, Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, we see this time and time again. Like, we saw this with Madison Cawthorn, too. It's like, we get that relationships are complicated. We get that marriage is very hard, and divorce, while no one wants it, is a totally normal, regular thing that happens. But when you make it your brand that a family does not divorce, a family is a man and a woman, like, you back yourself into this corner of completely, like, not living and engaging in reality. And so I'm not surprised at the statement. That was my thought immediately, was like, okay, well, what are you going to say to all the people who you've constantly been saying, like, you know, I'm a good Christian woman, and like her brand is this like Christian nationalist. So to me, I'm glad she has an answer, even though it's absurd and stupid. I'm glad she knows that she has to answer for the hate that she's sown. And just lastly, I think the timing of this is crazy. Like, because she is running for re-election, she's probably going to win. So it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like a tight contest. But announcing this in almost October before an election is wild to me. Like, what's going on there? There had to be some. I am into gossip. Wait.
Yeah.
So I know you, like, if you want to take the high road, that's great, whatever. But I am into, like, you know, this kind of dissecting these things. And there's something there. It is September 29th. She's got an election in a month. Like, what's the story there?
That is, yeah, you would think, apparently, if they've been separated for some time, they could probably wait until after the election. But again, I really don't care. I do have a fast pass to the high road. I agree. And that's why I'm not going to bring up the previous scandal about the polyamorous tantric sex guru. I'm not going to do that because I'm above that thing that I won't do. But anyway, and I know what some people are thinking. As you pointed out, there seems to be a bit of religious hypocrisy there, being holier than thou on some sorts of relationships that you think are unacceptable. And then when you do a thing that a significant portion of the people who go to your rallies think should be illegal, you suddenly don't have a problem with it. And some of you might be thinking, oh, well, now a bunch of conservatives are going to look at her as a religious hypocrite. No, they're not. They don't have a problem with Donald Trump or Rudy Giuliani or any of the other Republicans that have cheated on a bunch of people and divorced a bunch of people during terrible circumstances. No, Marjorie Greene is going to be just fine. And that's all that I have to say about that. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.
chicken from Popeyes.
One of the most exposed high-risk places there in that region, maybe even in the entire state, is the city of Cape Coral. A population of about 200,000, Cape Coral sits on a large peninsula surrounded by water, and Cape Coral is a classic Florida real estate story. Founded in 1957, the area was a swamp, bought up by developers who marketed it to prospective buyers as their own slice of paradise, a waterfront wonderland. You see on the sign there. Back in 2006, PBS aired a documentary detailing the history of how the city came to be.
Their salesmen spread out across the country and around the world, praising and sometimes exaggerating the joys of living in this new waterfront wonderland that was springing to life in Southwest Florida. Prospective buyers were flown to Cape Coral where they were wined, dined, and taken on car, plane, or boat tours and subjected to a high-pressure sales pitch. They called it Fly and Buy. Small aircraft often taking off from an impromptu strip on the Cape Coral Parkway would fly buyers over the vacant land where salesmen dropped bags of flour to mark their new home sites.
The thing is, as improbable as it seemed when they were doing that, it worked. As Michael Grumwald writes in Political Magazine, Cape Coral, quote, really captured the essence of Florida, precarious civilization engineered out of a watery wilderness, a bewildering dreamscape forged by greed, flim-flam, and absurdly grandiose visions that somehow stumbled into heavily populated realities. About 60 years after its founding, this is what Cape Coral looks like on a sunny day. It's beautiful, full of beautiful homes, and nearly all of which are on the water, all waterfront, thanks to the 400 miles of canals that weave through the city. And as you can see from the pictures, it looks like an incredible place to live. Of course, the danger is what happens when you get a near-direct hit from a nearly Category 5 hurricane on that peninsula that sits just a few feet above sea level. This is what Cape Coral looked like yesterday afternoon. Being swept through, the canals flooded, there was water, streets and homes. This is what the area looked like today. There's so much water, it is hard to tell where the canals are and where the streets are. So Cape Coral, in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, the danger, what happens when these two trajectories intersect, when they meet. On one side, the development of these kinds of areas, in Florida and other places, but Florida specifically, that are attractive precisely because of their proximity to the water and their natural beauty. And on the other, the undeniable fact that climate change is happening, and as we put more carbon into the air, as we heat the atmosphere, is producing more frequent, more extreme weather events that hit precisely those highly desirable areas like Cape Coral. What we're seeing today in Southwest Florida is the aftermath of that. Joining me now, Craig Fugit. He was a former FEMA administrator under the Obama administration. Before that, a state emergency management director in the state of Florida. So he knows a thing or two about the aftermath of a hurricane in that state. Craig, first of all, from your personal experience, just assessing the scope of the damage here, what's your initial assessment?
Well, the way I've been describing it is this is Southwest Florida's Hurricane Andrew. And it's going to change a lot of things. I mean, if you think about Hurricane Andrew, it was a big forcer to change, one, how the state responded to the disasters, but also the generation of statewide building codes. So I think what we're going to see coming out of Southwest Florida and looking at the type of damages and looking at what the water did, what the storm surge did, is hopefully, as we rebuild, we don't build it back the way it was. We build it for the future, and we build it for the risk that these storms are not once-in-a-lifetime events. They're very more frequent.
Andrew was in '92. That hit South Florida largely, and obviously was massively destructive. I still remember it. I was 13 years old. The largest hurricane disasters by dollar amount, Katrina is near the top, but two of the top five have happened in the last 5 years: Harvey and Maria, Sandy, and then Ida in 2021. What are the immediate things that need to happen on the ground in Southwest Florida right now in the aftermath of this to make sure that people are safe and secure and have shelter and have access to the things they need?
Well, what you're seeing today, the real focus is search and rescue, getting the people that have been cut off, perhaps injured, and getting them to the high ground. And then it's getting roads up. You can't do a lot till you can get in there, and everything from getting utilities up to trying to get a handle on how bad the housing situation is. We heard from people there, nowhere to live. And this is where FEMA has been working with the state to put together their housing task force. One of the things that the President's Declaration will allow is to provide renter assistance. But there's so much devastation, there may not be enough housing in the region. So where can people go? You know, we saw this with Hurricane Maria. People actually had to leave Puerto Rico and come to New York, Orlando, to get places to live while they were rebuilding. So, you know, these are questions that are having to be answered real time.
I want to counter-steer.
Still a situation where search and rescue is taking place. People are still having to be accounted for, and that's going to take some more time, and that's the part of the
Yeah, I remember we were down there 5 years ago for Irma, going by a shelter that I believe was a hockey stadium in Lee County.
I understand the beginning of that.
Thousands of people in there because they had evacuated their homes. And, you know, what you quickly realize in all those situations is a facility like that can work for 24 hours, but after that, it's not a place that you can put people up.
It's got lasers.
It doesn't really work for that. It's not designed for that. And to your point about the sort of supply of safe housing, I mean, that seems like that's going to be a real challenge for state, local, federal officials to make sure people have places to stay.
Absolutely. And if you think about Irma, a lot of those folks could go back home.
Right.
But for this storm, there's nothing to go back to. So that will
Sorry,
be,
I'm smoking
to deal with search and rescue and those immediate needs.
Okay.
That's going to be the next phase.
Let's see if I
where
can
do
fuck
we
this
put
guy up
people
with
in
it. Oh, no, I can't.
long-term
Oh, God, I'm
options?
fucked.
Like you point out, you want to get them out of those
See, I had a
shelters,
foolproof
get them somewhere
defensive
else
strategy.
where they can get
Oh,
basic needs
no,
and
I'm
have a place
fucked.
to stay. They got all the stuff that they need. But rebuilding here and getting enough housing back, that's going to be a huge challenge because it's not only looking at where people are going to live. Think about trying to get the economy back if we don't have any workers. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be that people are having to think through. That have major ramifications, days, weeks, and months out.
So you got to get the grid and the roads back up. You got to get emergency services restored, of course. Then shelter. I want to circle back to what you said in the beginning about this being Southwest Florida's Andrew, and that Andrew changed things. I mean, I was reading last night about Cape Coral. There were new FEMA-issued flood maps that were put out, I think, in October 2021, in which huge parts of Cape Coral were in areas that had elevated flood risk. In fact, zones that essentially required mandated federal flood insurance. And people were upset about that, and I understand when the government announces, hey, your premiums are going to go up and you have to buy this flood insurance. There was a huge
or I just move through things.
But the fundamental issue here is the risk profile has changed in these places, and it just seems like that's going to have to center in the discussions about rebuilding.
Yeah, this is being played out. I mean, Florida may be the canary in the coal mine, but this is being played out across coastal areas in the nation. And as FEMA has been updating those risks, what it will mean is when people go to rebuild and their homes have been destroyed, that's going to add more cost. And I think there's this tendency, we fight this so much, but I think we need to be forward thinking. If we're going to rebuild in these high hazard areas, it doesn't mean we can't develop. We're going to have to change what we're doing and how we're doing it. So when these storms hit in the future, there'll be damages, but it won't cause the catastrophic losses we're seeing from the storm.
Yeah, that really is the big question of how much we integrate that.
No way.
What about 6 months out? I mean, what about the sort of, not the long term of rebuilding, but making sure that people, some semblance of normalcy can be restored? What's the sort of post the next few weeks agenda here?
Well, once you start getting, the search and rescue winding down, you really start focusing on how much infrastructure can you get back up. You've already heard. It's not even going to be, practical to repair the power system in some places. You just got to build it back completely. But you want to get things like your fire stations and law enforcement, hospitals, and all of that up and running. You need to get businesses back up. One of the things you got to remember is there's a permanent residence down here, but it's also a big tourist destination, and their season is the winter months when it's dry and pleasant. And so getting that up and getting hotels open just to get the economy. They've been clobbered from COVID. Now this, that's going to really impact this economy.
All right, Craig Fugit, always great to get your perspective on these kinds of things, given your experience. I really appreciate you making time with us.
Jesus.
They're leaving a trail of destruction in...
Fuck off.
Florida, Ian regained hurricane strength over the Atlantic, and the storm is now heading back towards the U.S. It's expected to make landfall again tomorrow in South Carolina. Residents both there and further south in Georgia are being warned about storm surge, as well as strong winds and flooding. Some coastal regions like Liberty County and T-Bay Island in Georgia are already preparing for impact. I'm joined now by one of Georgia's 2 Democratic senators, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. Senator, are you concerned about the storm's impact in Georgia?
Good to be with you tonight, Chris. Yes, I'm from coastal Georgia, from Savannah. My family's there. And so I've been monitoring the storm closely, and I certainly want to encourage folks who live on the coastal areas to pay attention to their local officials. Do everything you can to protect yourself and your family. Meanwhile, my office stands ready to help in any way that we can.
You are obviously up for election in these midterms. You're just serving your first term. What do you see as the defining issue or issues for voters in your state in this upcoming midterm?
Well, I can tell you that representing the people of Georgia is the high honor of my life. This is work that I came to as a result of my lifelong commitment to service, and I continue to work on the things that I've worked on my whole career, trying to help people to live the best lives and that they can, and to provide for their families. And so I'm glad that I was able to pass in the Inflation Reduction Act a provision that I wrote which caps the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. Another provision that caps the cost of insulin. I come from a state where 11% of the adults have diabetes. When you need insulin, you need insulin. It's a drug that's been around 100 years. Big pharmaceutical companies have been price gouging insulin. I'm glad that we were able to cap it and to give Medicare the ability to negotiate the price of prescription drugs, all the while creating jobs up and down our state by investing in manufacturing right here in America.
Your opponent, Herschel Walker, recently, I believe, came out and endorsed a proposed national abortion ban. Former football stars endorsed a 15-week federal abortion ban, along with opposition to all abortions, sharpened his opposition to Medicaid expansion, and new attacks against transgender. I want to talk about that federal abortion ban, which has been proposed by Lindsey Graham, which, of course, would be the first of its kind in the country. It would make the landscape across the country like what it has been in Mississippi after Dobbs, or what was proposed. Do you support such a ban?
No, I do not. Women who have, for 50 years, have been able to control their own health care choices, saw that summarily taken away from them by an activist Supreme Court. My opponent supports the national ban, as you point out, on abortion. And he says no exceptions. So that includes rape, incest, the life of the mother. I think there are too many politicians crowding the room of patience. And his extreme position on this, his saying that he doesn't support Medicaid expansion. We've got 600,000 Georgians, most of them the working poor, who would benefit from Medicaid expansion. These are all the reasons why Georgians have a clear choice about who's ready to represent them in the United States Senate. I believe in the wisdom of women, and I support their ability to make choices. I think that a patient's room is too small and cramped a space for a woman, her doctor, and the United States government. He has a different view. I support Medicaid expansion because I believe health care is a human right, and it's past time for us to do something about that in Georgia. He has the opposite view, and so the contrast between me and him could not be more stark and more obvious.
Obviously, you've had a long and incredible career before becoming a U.S. Senator. What's the worst thing about being a U.S. Senator?
Well, you know, it's I'm the dad of 2 small children, and you know, it's tough being away from them when I'm up here. But as I look into their eyes, I have a 6-year-old daughter, 3.5-year-old son. I see not only my children, but children all across our state. And I'm someone who benefits from good federal public policy. I like to say I'm an alum of Head Start, a good federal program that invests in children. I'm an alum of Upward Bound, for the kid who's growing up in public housing on a college campus. And then Pell Grants and low-interest student loans. I know and understand the struggles of hardworking families and the difference that good federal public policy makes when it helps people to live their best lives. And so I'm deeply honored to represent the people of Georgia as a dad and as a pastor who serves in the Senate.
You just mentioned the cost of college and Pell Grants that enable folks to go to college who might not otherwise be able to afford it. Of course, the president announcing that policy through the Department of Education to cancel $10,000 student debt, $20,000 Pell Grant recipients. There's a lawsuit filed in Texas to strike that down. That lawsuit has been vacated for lack of standing, but it's clear, and we've heard this from your colleague Ted Cruz in Texas, that conservatives want to find a way to knock that down. What do you think about the efforts to try to essentially get the courts to strike down that debt cancellation?
Well, I'm glad that we were able to push and that we were able to provide student debt relief for kids, not only who graduate or attend 4-year colleges, but 2-year schools, community colleges and vocational schools. And this will provide relief for a lot of folks. What we've got to do now going forward is we've got to address the fact that college tuition has far outpaced inflation. We need some larger structural issues. Education made the difference. For me, it's the reason why a kid who grew up in public housing sits in the Senate. But whether you're a senator or a plumber, you need access to the American dream, access to home ownership, the ability to start a business. And that's the work that I'm honored to do on behalf of Georgians every single day.
You are an outspoken advocate for federal voting legislation. That legislation has not come to pass, and in fact, the court is now taking up another section of the Voting Rights Act. Section 2, in the term that's about to begin, they may severely weaken that. Are you confident that the extant protections in a state like Georgia are sufficient to guarantee that everyone who wants to cast a lawful vote in your state will be able to?
Well, I believe that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. And the right and access to the ballot is fundamental. It's part of what makes our system so great. It's something that I fought for long before I came to the Senate. And it's the reason why I know that I still have work to do in the United States Senate to protect this core value. You know, I was John Lewis's pastor, and In his memory, I continue to fight the good fight. But the people of Georgia have a chance to exercise their vote this election season. I want to encourage them to vote early, beginning October 17th.
Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock of Georgia, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, it's still thread. Awesome. Oh, I found a thing.
Love that chicken from Popeyes.
Ever since former President Trump's personal residence at Mar-a-Lago was searched by the FBI, Trump, Republican lawmakers, and conservative media have been pushing the idea that the FBI might have planted incriminating evidence while they were there. Trump isn't really guilty. He's being framed. It's...
Shh. Please. Oh. Holy shit. This is really loud. Anyway. So that's processing, like...
It's a witch hunt, etc.
Oh my god.
Trump's lawyers even suggested as much in their legal filings. But then, last week, Raymond Deere...
Holy shit. That audio processing is beyond the fucking max. And by that, I just mean, like, it's way too spot on. It's like I'm in your mouth. Sorry. There's a lot to take in, which if I were in your mouth, you'd probably be saying the same thing. So that's insane. Anyway. Let's check this out. Thanks for listening. You see that bit rate is keeping up. That's weird. Oh, that, hold on. The bit rate has to go to like 3K just to do this. Wow. And I'm not even like streaming. Okay, 24K. No, 25 or 25. Yeah, okay. See, that's 28. Well, there goes our fucking time. We were doing great. Anyway, I better find my fucking way out of here now. Which extra sucks, because I just found that fucking piece of whatever. Oh my god. There you are. Okay, well, it's decidedly not there. That was good. Fucking soundtrack's built and shit. God, I don't even know if I'm going the right way anymore. I'll just have to assume I am. What? The literal fuck? Jesus. That is one of those classic Sonic kills. You know, a tiny hill that you can't... You just like, you know, circumnavigated the entire fucking level, kicked all these asses. Oh my god. Such a dick. I'm out of here. Alright, yeah, you like circumnavigate the level at breakneck fucking speeds, you turn a corner and fucking just... Alright, so that was sick. Rendered amazingly. Soundtrack's awesome. Definitely gonna be recommending this game. Like a great mix of Sonic 3 and Sonic 3D Blast. Alright. Stop recording.